Well, I thought since this is such a small group, we would do this more in a discussion style instead of me standing up there and lecturing you about stuff. Because I want to tell you a little bit about what the Attorney General is doing, why I'm doing what I'm doing, and then I'll give you some background. And then I'd like to hear a little bit from you. So let me start off, if you don't mind. You all have had lunch together and have been here all day, and I've met Marla. But would the rest of you just introduce yourself to me and tell me what your job is and what county you're from? You want to start?
Lydia Evans with Central County.
Okay.
I'm Larry Heston. I'm county counsel.
Okay.
Part-time, but I'm a lawyer, but I'm not a county counsel member.
Since I'm one too, I won't hold that against you. And Marla, we met earlier.
I'm Jim Taylor. I'm with Delaware County. I oversee the highway engineering.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Patrick Manship, Madison County Surveyor.
Okay.
Amanda Alt, Floyd County and Chief Deputy Officer.
I'm Ken Hedge of Boone County Surveyor.
Great.
And
Okay, great. So we've got kind of a mix of elected officials and staff and all over the state, so that's good. That's one of the, hopefully I can bring something to the table to empathize with you all in your jobs. I've had, as Christine mentioned, okay, is that better? All right. I have been both at the state of Indiana as a lawyer and a policy person under first Morris Wooden and then Connie Noss, and then I ran for county clerk in Marion County. And if you were around 8+ years ago and you're in the Indianapolis media market, you could see what a tough time I had of it. I still go to the airport these days and I give the TSA guy my ID, and he looks at me and goes, "Oh, how are you? Are you okay?" And it's been over 8 years. So I know what a tough job that all of you have, and so many different components go into knowing your job. Not only the business aspect of your job and the detail of the business, but you are often human resources people. You've got staff that you hire. You've got policy issues. Just keeping up with the legislative changes can drive you absolutely insane, I know. And then on top of all of that, you have to, if you're an elected official, run for election, deal with media. It's an all-encompassing job, and we at the state, and I say that again because I'm now back there, throw a lot at you all the time. So hopefully, having the experience that I do, I can be helpful as I go around the state, and that's going to be one of my jobs. So the bottom line is the Attorney General, Greg Zeller, hopefully you all have met him before or come across him. I know he gets out and around the state quite a bit, has made an effort this past year to step up what we call the look at public integrity. To give you a little bit of background, it has happened across the country, not just here in Indiana, but there has been a trend that the feds have come in and dealt with public corruption issues. The states have not historically done a very good job, for obvious reasons, because we all know each other, doing the kinds of prosecutions, both civil and criminal, that probably need to get done. Now, the good news is that that tide is turning. And many states, not just here in Indiana, have decided that, wait a minute, we need to be taking care of these issues ourselves. And so here in the state of Indiana, we have seen quite a bit of work being done with the public, the Inspector General, who I understand you heard from him or someone from his staff this morning. That was created largely to overlook state agencies. And I know you all have a loving relationship with the State Board of Accounts and what they do, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But things have been put in place recently. Having said that, in the past, you may have seen this, and I don't know if the Inspector General passed this out to you before. This is what other people think the state of Indiana status is in terms of corruption. Have you all seen this? It's called the Corruption Risk Report Card. And here in Indiana, we have a whopping C-. So we're not the worst state in the country, but we are far from being the best state in the country. And as you'll notice, a lot of that has to do with public access to information, which I know you got a good dose of prior to lunch today. And you all deal with that probably on a daily basis with people requesting information from you and trying to figure out what's appropriate to give out, what is not appropriate as information that you should keep to yourselves. But the bottom line is a C- isn't very good all the way around, and we want to work to improve that. So the Attorney General is forming a coalition of elected officials, the state examiner, the new state examiner, Paul Joyce, other folks, to put together a program to reach out to elected officials and staff people to help them understand how they can put things into place that will prevent public corruption from happening to begin with. Now you're probably looking at me going, well, that clerk down the hall was going to steal money whether I put anything in anyway. And that is true. I mean, we're not going to ever prevent someone who is going to be determined to steal money and get into those situations. But many of the things that come through the State Board of Accounts, and perhaps you yourselves have had this experience, are more about not willful stealing or anything else. It's just the types of management issues that get put into place, best practices. I know AIC does a really nice job trying to educate their membership on what best practices are, but we're going to continue doing that. So, first of all, let me tell you, please interrupt me at any time. I really want this to be a discussion about all of this, and I'm looking to for help from you as we get this coalition underway on what concerns that you have, both with, talk to me about the State Board of Accounts, what can be done better, because we really do want to create an atmosphere that makes things better off. But to get started, I'm going to sit down because since we're a small group, if you can't hear me or you can't see me, let me know. You all know what public corruption is. I mean, we all intuitively know what public corruption is. It is when an employee of the state of Indiana or a county or any person who receives their funding from the public taxpayers does something, not necessarily stealing, but does something for their own personal gain. It is defined, I've got another handout before I sit down, in the state of Indiana on a series of public corruption statutes. And this document, it's two-sided, is just a summary of all of the various code sites that deal with corruption and how it's handled. And the first thing on the list that I wanted to talk to you about, because you may or may not have ever seen this, is called Criminal Offenses Against General Public Administration. Now these are probably pretty obvious to you. I mean, we all know what bribery is. We all know what ghost employment is. But what a lot of people do not realize is that these charges in and of themselves are felonies. And you may be aware that the description of felonies, we're going away from letter felonies, so A, B, C, D felonies, to a numbering system that's across the criminal code, but they're all felonies. And so to give you an example, if someone in your county, let's pick on librarians for a minute. If the librarian takes receipts and she's caught, and the county prosecutor decides to charge her, they can charge her for theft. They can charge her for whatever the underlying issue happens to be. But they can also charge on criminal misconduct charges. And again, that is a felony in and of itself. One of the reasons I want to talk about this is because we are seeing an uptick in these kinds of charges. It used to be that county prosecutors who were inundated with all kinds of things like meth labs and gangs and violence would look at a $1,500 theft and say, oh, well, Henrietta's going to pay it back, so we're just going to plead down, we'll do a misdemeanor theft charge. And public misconduct, no one wants to talk about that. Well, guess what? People are talking about it now because they want to send a message that even small amounts are not permissible. So I think it's a good idea for all of us to reacquaint ourselves with the various misconduct type charges so that, not that you're doing it yourself, but when you go back and talk to your employees, you can let them know that probably not going to look the other way anymore just because you needed to pay the gas bill, and so you took $500, which happens all the time, and if you pay it back, everything's going to be okay. We're coming into a new era of it's not going to be okay anymore. Now, to that end, what can you do to help prevent that from happening to begin with? As I said before, clearly you're not going to prevent someone who is truly trying to steal money and they've got the system figured out. You're not going to prevent them from doing it. But you can put certain things and practices in place that will help you catch it, help to prevent it to begin with, and also show the public that you're really trying to manage your offices very well. So just going through this quickly, if you look at the list, there is official misconduct. And one thing to know about these statutes, they all mention knowingly and intentionally. So if you just messed up and you didn't realize it, it's not a criminal felony. But if there's a knowingly and intentionally. The official misconduct means that you solicit, accept, or agree to accept from an appointee or employee any property other than what the public servant is authorized by law to accept as a condition of continued employment. Doesn't sound very exciting. I bet you haven't heard anybody. I want to tell you about a case that's ongoing right now and give you something to think about. I'm going to redact names because you all may know, and I didn't think I heard this particular county, but this is a school corporation. And several years ago, this particular school corporation hired a new treasurer. And the superintendent hired this treasurer and said, hey, treasurer, you're really bumping up the level of accountability we have. You're a CPA, and you're going to bring on some new things for us. So the previous treasurer was paid $30,000, but we're going to pay you $40,000 a year. And the new treasurer said, great. And a couple of months later, the superintendent said, yeah, it's been approved. Go ahead and put that in. So the treasurer directed the payroll people to give him his raise. Everything goes along swimmingly for 3 or 4 years. And there comes a new superintendent. New ones didn't like the old superintendent. The new superintendent says, you know, treasurer, who authorized you to take that additional $10,000 a year? And the treasurer says, wait a minute, the superintendent told me, he said the school board authorized it. Guess what? There are no minutes from the school board. So he took the word of the superintendent, gave himself a $10,000 raise for 4 years, and guess who wants their money back? So right now, the State Board of Accounts, which found this audit, has asked for $40,000 plus fees back from this person. And by law, they're entitled to get it. And this poor guy, in my opinion, Paul Joyce, the state examiner were here, would probably say, don't be so sympathetic to him, but I think he probably had an agency issue, as we say in the legal world, that he relied on the superintendent to tell him. The point is, this person didn't intend to steal. I don't think there's any evidence that he thought that he was doing something wrong. So I don't think he falls under the criminal. It was not knowingly or intentionally on his part. But coming up with about $45,000 is a rough thing to do, and that's the civil part of it. So we'll get back to that case because it goes to kind of the procedures of what happens. But going down the list, you have bribery. Obviously, that's it's self-evident. Ghost employment. How many of you have had a ghost employment issue in your county that you know of? Yeah. Needless to say, in Marion County, I think there are a few agencies where it's still going on. They're so big, people don't know. Conflict of interest is one that we don't see many prosecutions on because they're much more difficult to accrue. Profiteering from public service, and I put under there that subsection, purchasing offenses. Boy, your purchasing folks really need to know what they're doing, or they're going to get into big trouble. Violation of depository rule, violation of cash book rule, violation of itemization. The point is, there's a whole list of things that the statutes contemplate that are breaking the rules. And the thing about knowing and intentionally is not intentionally stealing, but intentionally breaking the rule, maybe because it's easier, falls into this category. So anyway, those are the general charges of public corruption that we all need to be aware of. What happens? How do we catch people? Well, you all know the State Board of Accounts comes in every 2 years and does their audit, and guess what? They mostly don't catch stuff in their audits. You well know they're looking at this number, and usually if those things add up, everything's fine, and maybe you get a little ding here for not reporting this in this column or that column. But by and large, they don't catch the things that are illegal in the criminal sense. They go to the restroom, however, and one of the other employees says, hey, you ought to look at so-and-so. And suddenly the light comes on and they go pull receipts. And that is primarily how things are caught. And what happens is they start digging deeper. And then even though you don't think that your office has major issues, lo and behold, they find some things. I know as clerk, I had 120 employees in my office all over the city-county building, and down in the basement, we had where we stored all our records, and people could come in and pay small amounts of cash for copies of public records. And did I go down there very often? No, didn't need to. I had a good supervisor. The supervisor, though, kept thinking that it was funny that she's noticed that even though they were small amounts, things weren't really happening in terms of cash coming in. Just didn't seem quite right. So we installed a camera. We had 2 guys working down there, and they would provide for the customer their copies, and they'd say this is $8.90, and $5.90 would go into the drawer, and the rest of it would go right in their pocket. And again, this wasn't a whole lot of money, but it was happening almost every transaction. And because there was not a computerized system to say they made this many copies and they charged this much, there was no way to tell what they were supposed to be charging. The only evidence we actually had was the film itself of them putting the cash in their pockets. Obviously, we referred that directly to the county prosecutor, and 3 years later, I think they pled to misdemeanor. It took forever to have anything done with it. But again, State Board of Accounts comes in, they typically don't find things in their audit, and that's not to say they aren't trying, but as you all know, State Board of Accounts has had their staffing cut pretty dramatically over the last couple of years, just like most other state agencies. So the bottom line is you as office holders or managers in your office need to be doubly aware of what's happening. And I know you know some of these things. We practice this every once in a while. One of those best practices, when someone's gone on vacation, go through their desk drawers. And we don't like to do that because we think of that as a violation of privacy. However, when we've done that, both at the state level and at the county level, local level, it's amazing what you find. Old checks stuck in the back that never got deposited because they were just not dealt with, or in some cases, some actual fraud. Have someone else log on to that person's computer, and not even necessarily when they're on vacation. A rotation of computers periodically is a good idea. And one of the reasons I think Greg Zeller hired me is because I've been through all of these things, so I can tell you personal stories about things. Again, when I was clerk, we had we had a wonderful woman who'd been there for 30 years, whose job it was to collect all the court records when an appeal was filed with the state and certify the record and send it off to the state. And it was her full-time job. It was a big job. She got terribly ill and went into the hospital, and we brought another person in from another part of the office who presumably was able to take her place. And time went on, and the supervisors kept saying, how's everything going? And everything's great. And Then one day I got a phone call, and it was from a lawyer who I knew because his child was in the same school as my child, and he said, "I'm really sorry to call you." I said, what's the matter? "Well, I put in a request for documents for an appeal, and it's been 6 weeks. And we're getting up to the court deadline of the state, and that it hasn't been produced." And I said, "Let me check into it and see what's going on." Turns out the guy was producing only a trickle of the documents. Now, what would have happened is at the 6-week mark, the state Supreme Court justices would have called me in on the carpet, and I would have been in horrible trouble. As it was, I ran over to them and said, "I've got this big employee issue." Started investigating. He had been sitting at his computer on the internet, on his phone, and he didn't tell us. And had this friend not called me and said, "I think you've got an issue," we wouldn't have known. So had I swapped him out maybe every other week and had multiple employees dealing with that, we would have discovered much sooner that he was not doing what he was supposed to do. I'm sorry, is that mine? So, I've got the same whistle, that's why I thought it was mine.
It's a woman thing.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so let's go back to procedure for a little bit. State Board of Accounts comes in, they do their audit. Maybe they don't catch something through the audit, maybe they get a whisper in their ear, and they produce a report. You've all seen them that look something like this. We all cringe. We don't want it to be a thick report. We want it to be a very thin report. And they have a few findings. If the finding is something substantial, if they find that money is missing, and it's typically the money missing part, not the ghost employment, but they do find those periodically, they are required by state statute to refer it to the Attorney General. Now, in Indiana, as you know, because we have a history of Jacksonian politics, we don't like to put all the power in one place. Authority for taking care of these cases is spread out all over the place. That's why the Inspector General was in here talking this morning about state agencies. The Attorney General has this piece. State Board of Accounts, county prosecutors, all of them are involved in this process instead of one centralized location. So the State Board of Accounts will refer it to the Attorney General. They may refer it to the Inspector General. They will refer it to the county prosecutor and or the grand jury, or the U.S. Attorney or the state police. So there are all kinds of places these things go. The county prosecutors are responsible for doing criminal prosecutions. And as I mentioned earlier, it has been the case in the past where it depended on the county prosecutor to actually prosecute public corruption element of it. And it has been a mixed bag. Again, some are overwhelmed. They don't have the forensic investigators on their staff, or they've got meth labs, and this is paltry stuff for them. In that case, if it's bad enough, the U.S. Attorney can be called in and bring the criminal prosecution. The Attorney General's job is to go after the money in a civil court. And so Greg Zeller has filed, I think we're right up around $5 million worth at the moment that are still outstanding from various places. This one was just this week. Attorney General suit names former LaPorte County Deputy Auditor. It seeks the recovery of slightly more than $153,000. They're also getting back $45,000 in audit costs. Apparently, this person was heading out to the casinos. It's very difficult to get the money back in most cases, and that is because when people steal those sums of money, they have been at the casino, they've been buying drugs, the money's not there anymore. It's not like they're saving up in a Swiss bank account to go after it. But we're talking about some pretty substantial sums.
Is there a threshold that's less than, certainly, is there a threshold that triggers the AG going after the funds?
No. And I will tell you that Greg Zeller feels very strongly about even small sums. if he were here speaking, he'd bring up the case of the band leader stealing the uniform money that was collected from the kids. It's a really, in the scheme of state and local government, a paltry amount. But it's the egregiousness of the thought that these kids and their parents trusted this money to him and he stole it that triggers going after it. Now, the other thing to know about civil prosecutions is that treble damages do apply. So if you steal $50,000, the Attorney General is going to file suit and ask for $150,000 plus expenses, and that is allowable under Indiana code. So, and that is a discretionary request, the treble damages, and I will tell you that Greg deals with those on a case-by-case basis depending on the intent and what was happening with the individual. So the band leader was one where he felt really strongly. The guy knew exactly what he was doing. He didn't care that these kids didn't have uniform money, and so it was particularly egregious. But no, that's there's no level, and that's one of the reasons that we're upping this whole outreach program, is to let people know, and it's primarily the public that we want to know. I mean, all of you who are coming to these courses and who are taking the time to get your units and going to the AIC conferences, you're doing your job to learn what you need to know. It's the other folks, and they're around, who aren't really doing what they need to do in order to prevent these. But that all of these cases undermines the public's confidence in our government and our democracy, and we want to put a halt to that. We want to tell the public two things. One, most elected officials and their staff are really good people. We elected officials aren't doing it for the money, I can tell you. I mean, we and our employees aren't doing it for the money. We do it because we want to help our communities and we feel good about it. We have a particular skill set. So most folks are really good and are doing it for the right reasons. But the few that aren't doing it or have gotten into trouble and dipped into because it was easy, the receipts were right there and I couldn't help myself and I had to pay my kid's orthodontist bill, those are the people that we intend to tell the public that we will not tolerate this behavior. And so you're going to see a big upswing in that. I will also tell you, for those of you who have not had much interaction with State Board of Accounts recently, with the new changeover with our new state examiner, you're going to see more of these cases. He is rearranging staffing levels. He is going to have a group whose job it is to do risk assessments around the state to try to better identify through the financial documents where there are anomalies that don't quite seem to make sense. So they will no longer be just coming in and doing the CAFR audits and looking at the numbers like this. They're going to really start taking a deeper look. And with computerized financial forensics now, it's a lot easier to hone in on things than it used to be. I met recently the president of the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, who is going to be joining our coalition. And I will tell you, the level of technology that they're applying to this is incredible. They have these computer models. It's much like what the insurance companies use to figure out if someone's scamming the insurance company. They can look at how much money was asked for, where it came from, that sort of thing. They plug in all of these data points and they can say, oh, there could be a problem in Clinton County. Maybe we should go in and take a look at it. The new state examiner will be using and utilizing more of those tools. So again, it's more important than ever that you put in these best practices and management tools to nip that in the bud before you ever get there.
This is going to be done even with the short diminished staff?
Well, and I haven't looked at it in the last week or so, maybe Christine can tell you. The state examiner had a bill that passed through the Senate handily, and last time I checked it was still in the House. It was 1308, I think. Christine, is that right? Do you remember? In which they were changing things up slightly, and one of the changes was that although the governor appoints, there will be a council of senators and House members who approve the appointment. And then they must meet with the state examiner on a frequent basis. And the intention here is to be able to tell the fiscal body that he needs more money and why. So he's taking a very direct approach and saying, I'm going to advocate from the legislature more funds so I can beef up my staff. Hasn't happened yet. And of course, I think there's a fine line that you can walk. He may get some pushback from some of his legislators at some point. However, I think you're going to see, even without immediate staffing increases, some reshuffling to take a look at certain other things. One of the things that when I first started looking into this on behalf of the Attorney General, I realized that there were very few state agency cases of late that were filed. In fact, there were none in the last 2 years. And I said, why is that? Because when I was at the state, there were a whole bunch going on all the time. And they said, oh, the state auditor has a computer system and all the funds are run through there, and there just isn't any public corruption in the state agencies. Well, I think you all know that that's just not the case. As I was talking to this person, I thought, I can think of 3 ways right now, if you don't have the right checks in place, that state agencies can do stuff. But again, that staffing had been dwindled down to nothing, and I think you will see a big increase in state agency investigations and reports out of the state examiner's office in the near future, which is only fair. I mean, they're doing it to the local elected officials. They should be doing that as well there. Let's see. Go down, if you'll look at the bottom of the authority summary under reports of financial examination and civil procedures, you can see it says substantial amount of public funds has been misappropriated or diverted, that it was committed by an officer or employee of the office, and so then, as I said, the State Board of Accounts refers it to the Attorney General. There are certain additional powers. If you have a public contract, and there was a case recently where the contract was for sidewalk repair. Go figure. And guess what? The sidewalks never got repaired, but the cash was outlaid. That came to light because 25 interested taxpayers signed a petition to file it. And I don't know if any of you have had that scenario in your counties, but that has happened a number of times, because sometimes the best advocates are the people on the ground who know what's happening, that their sidewalks weren't fixed, but Billy Joe Bob's company still got the check for it. There also, the Attorney General hasn't utilized this, and I don't know that he will, but he does have the authority to participate in the criminal prosecution. So in cases where the county prosecutor, for whatever reason, is reluctant to actually bring criminal prosecution, the Attorney General can kind of step in and suggest, the language is a little weak, but he can authorize and suggest and cajole, and this Attorney General hasn't felt the need to do that yet. But again, as we step up these types of things, it's going to be important for folks to know that that is possible. And of course, you heard from the Inspector General this morning. He also plays a role in all of this from the state agency standpoint. Just as a quick aside, I don't know how many of you were aware of how all of the Inspector General issue came about. Originally in the legislation, the Inspector General was going to be someone who served under the Attorney General, much like the Solicitor General does. The Solicitor General's job is to take cases to the Supreme Court and defend the state of Indiana. The Inspector General was going to do that as well, and at the last minute, the legislature pulled that out and made the Inspector General answer directly to the governor. So it's, again, pulling apart the powers, the central authority, so that in order to get these cases done, it requires so many different agencies and people to be involved in it, which again is why there is now this new coalition that is being put together to have better communication, to share investigators. Attorney General has investigators, obviously State Board of Accounts, et cetera. So they're all going to be working much more closely together. Any questions so far? I've been talking for a long time now.
This is partially anecdotal, I guess, but there's been a perception, I think, among many county officials that when it comes to state board of accounts audit, they sort of turn a blind eye to the judiciary. They find something, it's just, they find it, and that's it. It's,
Yeah.
It doesn't go any further.
Yeah. You're not.
Has that been your observation?
Well, let's put it this way. I have not seen any. I've got a list of cases over the last few years, and there have been no judicial cases referred to the Attorney General. I hazard a guess, and Paul Joyce would be more than happy to talk to you about it, I'm sure. But I think given the dynamic of the political appointment in this particular case, he's going to be much more independent than we've seen in the past, and so that may well have an uptick as well. You know, it is the case. I think in all the corruption cases across the country and even across the world, there is no particular organization that is completely free of corruption ever. No matter what you do, no matter how many double signatures you have, no matter how much you record your meetings and prove everything, there is always a way for people to get at it. So, you know, when I hear that state agencies are doing such a good job, there can't be any public corruption there, or the judges' staff are doing such a good job, whatever, it's just, that's not possible. Finding them all is the hard part. Without enough investigators, without the political will to prosecute. And, county politics, as you all know, can be most interesting. Former sister-in-law doesn't like the new brother-in-law, and you know, little backbiting here. Or in the case of the superintendent in the school system, I mean, that was when it wasn't even family related, and the new superintendent, there was a squabble. So I think the point of the exercise is that with the right political will, we can take care of these things. One of the things that you will be seeing in the not so distant future, probably mid-April or so, will be a new website, separate standalone website with the Attorney General that is going to allow for a tip line. It will actually, people will be able to call in. Now, of course, as you know, tip lines can be a whole basket of something. And there will be, you know, that you have to make the distinguishing factors of, is this just a crank calling? Is this the real thing? Does this need to be looked into? But Greg Zeller feels strongly that the public and elected officials, staff, and people around the state need to have a place where they can file complaints. So we'll see how this kind of progresses. We're actually working towards a criminal and civil justice summit. The Attorney General hosts annually in downtown Indianapolis. And this year, the entire day will be spent on public integrity. The Attorney General of Colorado will be coming in to speak. Some of you may know Cal Bellamy, who is a lawyer who's up in Northwest Indiana, who does a lot of work in ethics cases. And then we're going to have breakout sessions for county officials. We're going to have a breakout session for city officials and schools in order for people to really be with their counterparts and figure out what they can be doing in their own offices to help prevent some of these stuff. So what the Attorney General will tell you is that, again, since most of the elected officials are really good people, we want to educate and give them the tools to prevent these things. Once we do that for a couple of years, we're going to come down on everybody who's still not doing that type of stuff. So I guess what I'd like to do, we've talked a lot about State Board of Accounts and how all of these things work, is I'd like to hear from you all what your experiences are, both good and bad, what can be helpful to you. One of the things, for example, that I've heard is that sometimes when you have a question, you're not sure how it's supposed to be done. Being able to ask and find someone either at State Board of Accounts or whoever at the state auditor's office to give you the answer can sometimes be difficult. Is that something that you all experience? No?
Not recently, I never had any trouble. Back years ago, I used to have a colleague for example, just every day been there 27 years.
Yeah.
And bam, she's called me, and then I had to call back in about 2 minutes because our county attorney said, no, he said, I called them, they told me this. So I would call back to go, Margaret,
Right.
this is what she would go, oh, your county attorney was told exactly what I was told. And I did notice that back then, because it wasn't computer time and everything, it was early night. Not everybody had them, but if I wanted any written statement, I had to write.
Request an opinion.
Request. I had to write the letter, request all the information. And that was always kind of bad because it was a lot of these things we needed to know
Quickly.
quickly.
Yeah.
So that you know, that's the only time I had to work with it.
Anybody else have experiences, either good or bad, that were things that would be helpful to you all as we beef up these types of best practices for the state?
I have a feeling, just from some conversations that I've had, that with the degree of communication that now exists between State Board of Accounts and Department of Local Government Finance, that's, I believe, avoided some of the problems, the questions that
Good.
have existed in the past.
Good. Glad to hear that. In terms of best practices, of course, AIC has on their website lots of best practices. We're going to be putting together things, and again, for the website so everybody can have access to it pretty easily, and we'll be incorporating quite a bit of things that are already out there. And I love this case, this poor superintendent and the treasurer, because had the school board recorded their meeting, this would never become an issue.
And was that one of the things they were to do?
It is
They
not.
have
It is
minutes of-
not required, and
Wow.
that's one of the things. You are not required to record them. And I had a meeting with the mayor recently, and he's getting their city is getting ready to do a pretty big financial development section, and I said, and their development commission doesn't record their meetings at all. And I said, you're getting ready to expend tens of millions of dollars. And what you don't want to happen is someone come back and say, well, so-and-so had a conversation with me on the side and said I could have that contract. If you record those meetings, you avoid some of those things. You're not going to avoid all of it, because as you all know, not everybody in the county is always happy all the time. But you at least have a visible public record. And there's always the question of, well, okay, he said to me, I've got this guy who requests information every day. He wants copies of everything under the sun. And what do I do? I mean, if I'd have one staff person doing that all day long every day. And I said, you know, we all have to make reasonable judgments. Yes, you need to respond to him within 24 hours to say, yes, this is public information, or no, this is not public information. It may take a week for us to, you know, if it's public information, to accumulate. He's not entitled to it within 24 hours. So, but to the extent that we can be transparent as elected officials and managers, we should be as transparent as possible. And that's one of the things that we're hoping that most bodies who make decisions eventually actually record those meetings instead of simply taking minutes. Minutes can be lost, minutes can be transcribed incorrectly, and quite frankly, it depends on the person who's taking the minutes what information gets in there. And in this particular case, it cost this poor man $45,000.
I'm just, ever since you told us about the case, I'm really puzzled. Did not the school board approve their budget annually?
They did.
And it was not in the budget?
Well, it was in a total number. So the total number in the budget that they saw and approved included the increase, or so they claimed, but because of the way the budgeting was like, they couldn't prove
No,
it.
they didn't do a line item
They did not
budget
do a
for
line item.
salaries?
No,
Gosh.
I know. So again, that is a situation that, and I have to read you this portion, because like I said, I think this is a really good example for all of us. The Board of School Trustees is submitting this official response. All they did was, in their response, criticize the previous superintendent and say, yeah, it's not our fault. And it agrees with SBOA's finding that the salary increases paid to the former treasurer at the direction of the former superintendent were not approved by the Board of School Trustees. So what do you do if your State Board of Accounts? There is no recording of the meeting. It is not mentioned in the meeting minutes. The superintendent, the former superintendent says, yes, we had the meeting, they approved it. The current school board and current superintendent go, no, we didn't. And so the State Board of Accounts says, well, there's no evidence.
There may be big bucks there, because I'm guessing none of the teachers' increases were, that there would be a man to substantiate that either.
Right. So again, I feel very strongly this treasurer did not intend to give himself a salary. To me, that's quite obvious. And frankly, the Attorney General's staff who actually civilly prosecutes these cases were baffled because they are required under state statute to pursue this because the state examiner referred the report. And yet the case is not a good case. So the young lawyers that were working on it were kind of like, well, do we have to take this? The bottom line is they're actually finishing up a settlement. This person will end up paying something, not the full amount. But imagine his legal bills just to get someone to defend him, the school board's legal bills. So again, if we can avoid those things, we should be avoiding them. And there are plenty of things that we can do to help stop that.
We had an auditor that did have to leave because of that, but during her time there, we only had 2 custodians in the building and business people, and the part-time janitor comes in and tells me, goes, so-and-so gave me a $3 an hour raise, and I went, she can't do that.
Right.
I said, that isn't how it works.
Yeah.
And I said, you're making more than the full-time lady that does everything. And, it went through. So, well, supposedly one of the commissioners said it was okay. And I went, no, commissioner. And I, and maybe that one commissioner did, but still no right.
That's right.
And it wasn't budgeted, and it was, it just, of course, it ended up in that horrible fiasco anyway, so. But that was one thing, and somebody just walks in and was told by several, you're in charge of everything, you can do whatever you want. And I said, no.
Let me ask you this about getting information to your colleagues. Again, you guys are the ones who are here because you want to get more education and get your credits and all that. The people who aren't doing the amount of work that needs to be done to really know their jobs well. And some of them, these part-time jobs, counselors, I don't want to pick on counselors, but they think it's all a legislative issue and they'll go in and whatever. So we want to try to draw them in, county counselors and city counselors, and get them to these educations. How do you feel about called meetings of State Board of Accounts? Do you get good education from those? Is it something that you would do more of if more meetings were called so that people were required to come? Is that, and in your area?
I've only been elected county surveyor for, I think, 22 years.
Oh, is that all?
What I've observed over the years, it seems like some of the county attorneys, whether it be a board attorney, they'll take it. The pay's been pretty minimal.
Sure.
But they're going to listen to what the people that appoint them, which are generally your county commissioners or your planning commissioner, drainage board. Over the years, it seems like I've heard that from other counties where maybe they don't put the effort and time into the job, knowing all the requirements by the state.
So you mean the attorney or the officials themselves?
The attorneys that work
For the officials.
The
So-
boards. you
So the
know.
drainage board says, we really want to cut a contract to do X, Y, Z, and we don't want to bid it. And the attorney that they hire goes, well, you can get around bidding that by doing this, this, and this. Because
Instead
that's
of
what the
taking-
board wants to
Instead
hear.
of taking situations under advisement, a lot of times decisions have been made because the legal counsel, I'm not going to pick on just the county attorney, the legal counsel
Sure.
would support the client's request.
Gotcha.
Instead of pursuing it the right way, and drainage issues are pretty gray anyway.
Right, right.
I don't have the answers, but I see times are changing and it's time for some things to change.
So that kind of begs the question, do we need to do more outreach to attorneys that are on contract with these various bodies?
But see, a lot of the county surveyors aren't the ones that appoint the drainage board attorney, it's the drainage board.
Right, sure.
The commissioners in my county, it's the commissioners appoint the drainage
Right.
board, so they're gonna be representing the county commissioners versus the county surveyor.
Well, I know right now in Allen County, there's a big dispute between the county commissioners and utility regulatory folks. And they both have their publicly funded attorneys who disagree because their clients want this particular outcome. And in cases that are that technical, obviously there's, I don't know that the Attorney General would necessarily step in to help mitigate that dispute. But on some things, it's pretty black and white as to what is legal in terms of contracting and how boards have to approve things. And it has also been my experience that when certain boards and commissions hire an attorney, it's because he's a guy that's at the courthouse all the time, and we like him, and he's great to go out to lunch, and I want to help him out, and he doesn't necessarily have the expertise or go in and do the as much investigation as to what is really legal and right to begin with. So maybe some outreach to those folks to say, look, here are certain rules, and if you have a question, call us because we will help advise you. I know that the Attorney General sees his role as advisor and trying to help as much as anything else, and so maybe that's a place that we can do a little bit more work.
Don't get me wrong, we've had good attorneys. I'm just saying, you observe other counties and other
Sure.
boards that have,
Sure.
maybe the legal counsel for the boards think, well, if I'm wrong, what's going to happen to me?
I have had a suggestion over on the city side that corporation councils for cities need additional training for that very reason. And even if they're on full-time staff, they don't necessarily have that particular expertise, and so additional training for them would be helpful. Being a lawyer myself, there are not a lot of CLEs available out there for government attorneys to take. And so for your information, this Civil and Criminal Justice Summit that's going to be held April 29th will have CLEs available. So we'll try to get the word out, in particular to government attorneys to get more training in.
I think for the county councils, we've had now for probably close to 10 years, state hall meeting for county council members, which has been great. We always have state board of accounts represented in Department of
Sure.
Local Finance, and someone covering some other aspect of county government for us. But county council members are part-time.
Right.
Many of them have full-time jobs doing something else.
Yeah.
And even though we do this on a Saturday, it's in the summers between the end of the session, the legislative session, and budget time, we don't have the turnout that we should. We have maybe 150 show up out of 700 some odd. And I think the same would be true for county attorneys,
Sure.
because they have practices on the side. They're going to be reluctant to take time away from their
Sure.
their regular employment to attend a program to advise them on what they really need to know about county government.
Well, it's interesting that you should bring that up, because one of the things that we have discussed doing is creating our own separate certification programming on this particular subject of public corruption and integrity. And as part of that, having some online, technology is great. If you can get online and take the course, let's say it's half an hour. I mean, a lot of this is not so complicated. It's not, financing issues. You can take the course in half an hour, take the test, get your credits, and then maybe come once a year. And right now, make that a voluntary thing. I think most people who are running for office want to fly a flag that, yes, I took this course and I'm certified in public integrity, or whatever we end up calling it. And then ultimately, if that works, perhaps making it a requirement if we feel like we need to get some people. But try not to make it onerous in terms of time, because just traveling to various meetings, it takes a lot out of the day. But still try to get the information out to folks.
Good idea.
I do appreciate what the governor and the governor staff's doing. Instead of trying to catch people in wrongdoing, you educate them, just like the Department of Local Government Finance. You catch them, you educate them, you show them the process. If they continually do wrong, then you prosecute them.
Yeah.
Which is a good philosophy.
Well, and again, it's most people are not doing this because, or are not in these public offices because they are going to make the big bucks. It just is not the case. They're doing it for their communities, and they're doing it for the right reasons. And most of the cases that I've seen come through are people who have gotten upside down in something. They've, gambling's a big one. Drug addiction is a big one. Some of them, it's just hard times. They just can pay all their bills, and it was just with it. The mental thing of, well, if I'll just take it now and I'll pay it back in. Well, of course, guess what? They never pay it back in. And as sympathetic as I am to folks like that, we still need to make sure up front that they know that if they do this, they will eventually get caught. Deterrence ends up, investigation. People knowing that if they're going to be investigated at some point, either through an audit process or whatever, and that if they're caught, they're going to be pursued for the public corruption charges. Again, it's not going to stop everybody, but may make people think twice about taking the $500 out of the account, and with the idea they're going to pay it back because they're afraid of what will end up happening.
And that might be a thought on the training when you let it go in. Usually it's just sort of like what your job is.
Mm-hmm.
If that was one of the thought in,
Yeah.
this is what you can't do.
Yeah.
You can't take money, you can't fix things.
I don't even remember when I got elected clerk. I know I went to all of the meetings, but I don't remember what we covered that first training meeting. Do you guys remember? Well, you were. That was 22 years ago when you were newly elected. I'd be impressed if you remembered. But I'm wondering if there, again, with a heightened availability of educational materials and one other thing I've got my business card up here. One of the other things I wanted to tell you all is that in your own particular counties, if you think it is worthwhile for someone, either me or someone else from the Attorney General's office, to come in and talk about what public corruption is, here are the statutes, here's what's going to be happening, we're more than happy to come and do a little lunch program, 1 hour over box lunch. Especially if you guys know in your own counties who needs it and who doesn't need it, right?
It's needed, but a surveyor can't ask you to come into our county. It's going to take support from the county commissioners or the attorneys for the boards to ask you to come in and ask us for help. I see there's still, in county government, there's still part of the good old boy system that the state had and it's now changing.
Yeah.
It's not just money, it's favoritism,
Right.
zoning issues, that
Of
kind
course.
thing. I'm not speaking for my county.
Of course not. No. And none of that ever happened in Marion County, ever.
Yeah.
We have no old boys at all.
Everybody has good old boys.
Yeah. We had a lot of good old gals, too, I have to tell you.
Good old gals, good old boys, it's just a way to do it. But, I know our county, we have people in all the time. I think they would be very receptive. It was just something that was done every year.
Yeah.
Maybe, I just, you know, and you may not have to do it forever. but
No,
let's-
right.
Let's get this, you know, stopped. Our county, and we've only had the one incident, you know, for 9 million years, and since 1844, so it's not bad, but.
Again, you know, the undermining of the public trust is everything. I just feel so strongly about that, to make sure that the people that you represent trust you, and we all get a ding when someone takes $150,000 and goes to a casino. We all get dinged. And you know from all of that, no matter what party it is, everybody, you know, that right now, you know, there's this idea that public corruption is running rampant and everybody's stealing everything under the sun. And I don't believe that's true, but when it does happen, it is just devastating to all of us, so we want to get it stopped.
Makes us all look bad.
Exactly, exactly.
It takes us all down.
Well, again, I'm preaching to the choir here, so I don't want to go on too long, but I do take away from this, if you will, that you know, the Attorney General is wanting to create an education outreach program. Take advantage of it. I know AIC and IACT are both on board with what we're trying to do. If you can make it for the Criminal and Civil Justice Summit, April 29th here in Indianapolis, it's going to be free. It'll be at the State Government Center South.
What is that called again?
It's the Criminal and Civil Justice Summit. And it's typically attended by lawyers. They get CLE credits. But because of the subject matter this year on public integrity, I think it's going to be of much more interest to local officials statewide. So we do welcome everybody to come. I mean, there are some really good speakers on the lineup this time. Again, the Attorney General of Colorado is going to be giving some remarks about working with the feds and when not to work with the feds. We all, every once in a while, the feds kind of circle around. The state examiner will be there, and then we'll have these breakout sessions. And again, there's no charge for it at all, so you can bring staff if you wish. And we're going to be covering, you know, some of these things as well. So we invite you to do that.
Register for that.
We will. The document isn't quite out yet. We're finalizing the agenda, but I will pass it along to Christine, and she will probably send some sort of blast email to all of you. So look for that for sure. But we do invite you to come to that. And then any thoughts that you have, please take one of my cards. As we're developing this coalition and this program, I need your help. I know how to be a clerk of courts and I know how to be a state auditor, but I don't know a lot of your individual offices. And if there are things that you recognize or see that would be helpful, please let us know.
Since we have you on the tape.
Yeah.
I'm no longer president of the Councils Association, so I don't set the agenda, but would you or someone from your office be willing to speak to the county councils?
Would be delighted.
Call meeting?
Absolutely, would be delighted.
21st of June, I believe.
Okay.
That's a Saturday.
Great.
June.
Will you email me about
Well,
it, or you'll check with them and then?
I'll check with the
Okay.
current president.
Yeah.
Linda Sanders is her name.
Okay, absolutely.
And, if she hasn't yet accepted the agenda.
Would be delighted.
I think the information you have would be very much appreciated.
Thank you. Well, we want to be practical here, and again, I've been where you are, and I've been at the state level, and know how the state sometimes gets excited about chopping down on everybody. I've been on both sides of it, so hopefully I can be a good resource for you. And anything else that you have, I'd be delighted to hear about it.